Good morning. CFC, love is in the air. Happy Valentine's Day. Of course, you knew we were talking about love today, so everything fits together perfectly. Except, today we're going to be talking about a few folks we would really have a hard time giving Valentine cards to. Do you remember when you were a kid and you were supposed to make Valentines for everyone in the classroom? I remember we would decorate paper grocery bags with Valentine decorations and put our name on it real fancy. Then other kids would come in and bring their Valentines. We'd go around the room putting one Valentine after another in everybody's box, handing them out. It was a bit of a struggle, I remember back then, to make out those cards to kids you didn't like. Often you'd tape candy or suckers to the envelopes. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a candy miser. I didn't mind giving most of my classmates a blow pop, but the kids who shoot you in the back of the head with a rubber band, the kid who makes you look foolish in front of your third grade love interest, I'd like to dip their blow pop in the toilet or maybe let my dog lick it first and carefully rewrap it. I did say I would like to, but I didn't. And of course, the heartbreaking realization that comes when you realize that just because the pretty girl's Valentine said, "Would you be mine?" it didn't mean that all your dreams had come true because all of her cards said that. That's right. Valentine's Day leaves pre adolescent scars that may never heal. I digress. As I mentioned last week, in the month of love, I am going to share a series of three messages entitled Tough Love. 1 John 4 7 through 8 gives us that benchmark to measure our lives and to measure our love against. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love God, because God is love. The three areas of tough love that I'd like to cover. The first one is loving the unloved. Those that are hard to love, those that are typically socially distant because of whatever reason. As we learned about last week, the only way we can love the unloved is to begin to see people the way Jesus did. We connect with the person and are able to love outside of our own comfort zone. Today we're talking about loving the unliked. And then next week we'll talk about loving the undeserving. So, just like those rubber band shooting kids in the third grade, there are people out there that are hard to love because we don't like them. There are those who stand against what we stand for. There are those who stand for what we stand against. There are those whose very demeanor irritates us to no end. They've cheated us. They've taken advantage of us. They've said things to us that have left gaping emotional wounds. They've left us hanging out to dry. They've thrown us under the bus, as they say, letting us take a fall when it wasn't our fault. Can we just avoid them? Can we just generously buy them a one-way ticket to, well, anywhere? I don't find it hard to I don't find it hard to love irritating people who I don't see and who don't come to mind. But tough love happens when these people who are part of our churches, part of our family, our neighbors, our coworkers, are people that you can't avoid and probably shouldn't avoid. We have to spend time loving them. So, some of my favorite Old Testament stories in this space are Joseph and his brothers and Jacob and Esau. And I'm not going to read the accounts because I would spend the next hour just reading scripture. But most of you already know these stories, but I want to remind you of them because it definitely was talking about liking the unlikable. Joseph was an irritating little brother. He was Daddy's favorite. "Hey, look, I've got a new colorful coat. Too bad Dad only had one of them made." He shared dreams with his brothers, which all ended up with them bowing down to him. Some dreams you probably should just keep to yourself. They didn't like him. In fact, hate was probably the correct word. They staged his death. They sold him into slavery. They brought his fancy coat back home, covered in goat's blood, to sell the story to their dad that he had been killed. As we know, Joseph gets sold into Egypt, and over time he climbs the social ladder and ends up second in charge. During a famine, his brothers travel to Egypt to buy food, unaware that the food storage and sales are regulated by their now grown up little brother. After several events that I won't take time to cover, Joseph reveals his identity and weeps and embraces his brothers, telling them that what they meant for evil, God used for good. Love allowed forgiveness to happen on both sides. It's fair to say that all of those involved had gotten to the level of unlikable to the others. Let's look at Jacob. Jacob had cheated his brother. He had a twin brother, Esau. Now, they were definitely not look-alike twins, and if you want to read the story, you can. But Jacob had cheated his brother Esau out of his birthright, his dad's blessing, and to some extent, his hope for the future. I could talk a lot about this story, including how Esau must have looked like a red-haired Sasquatch, but I don't want to focus on. But I really want to focus on loving the unlikable. After Jacob the deceiver cheated his brother, he left home to keep his angry, extremely hairy brother from killing him. But many years and sheep and kids and wives later, Jacob's clan is traveling across country and finds out they're about to meet up with his brother Esau's clan. Well, Jacob goes way back in his memory banks and realizes that this is probably not going to be a good thing. So Jacob, knowing that they can't outmaneuver his brother Esau's clan, sends gifts ahead of them and splits his own clan into two groups, hoping that at least half of them would live to tell the story. Eventually, they meet up anyway, and Jacob knew he was about to pay the debt of his deception and cheating. But, love for a long lost brother overpowered the long forgotten hate, and Esau, that big red hairy teddy bear of a brother, only wanted to embrace Jacob and reunite the family. I think it is fair to say that Jacob would have been considered unlikable by his brother. I like these stories because we can all understand the emotions involved. I've felt them. You've felt them. So it's not something that is outside of our understanding or our existence as even people of faith. But what does Jesus say about loving the unliked? In Luke 6, he says, "Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you." Now I'm going to read through that again because each one of them, and each statement could be its own sermon. Love your enemies. Do good. That's right. Do good to those who hate you. Don't just avoid them. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. And pray for those who mistreat you. In Matthew 5, Jesus says, if you're offering a gift at the altar, and while you're there you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. Now, I think in this story, the forgiveness, or this scripture, forgiveness is meant to go both ways. In other words, if we need to work something out, we need to do it before we can be in a right place with God at the altar. We started with a few verses from 1 John. 1 John 4, 7 through 8. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love God, because God is love. Earlier in the same letter, 1 John 2, 9 through 12, John writes, anyone who claims to be in the light, but hates a brother or sister, is still in the darkness. Anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light, and there is nothing in them to make them stumble. But anyone who hates a brother or sister is in the darkness, and they walk around in the darkness. They do not know where they're going because darkness has blinded them. I think this is a key scripture. When I hold on to hate for someone, it blinds me. I spend my faith life stumbling around, wondering what to do, how to serve, how to make my life count, to figure out what my calling is from God. But hate is like cataracts over my heart. It keeps me from loving other people. It keeps me from fully being able to love myself. It keeps me from fully being able, ultimately loving God as I should. Love is tough. It's hard to love the unlikable, those who have cheated us or hurt us. But it's not a choice to hate others and love Christ. Those two things are very incompatible. Love is tough. It's hard to love those who have decided to make distance between you and them through the horrible things that they've said or done. We model Christ when we meet them at a moment of reconciliation. Love is tough, especially loving the unliked. But Jesus models the way. All we have to do is practice it.